right. Well, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started, everyone. I am one of those that really likes to start on time. That way, for those of us that joined on time, we're not wasting any of that precious time that we all have. So to kick it off, just a brief introduction about myself. My name is Nick Lutrick. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Task On, and we are a full-service e-commerce agency really designed to help drive sales for e-commerce brands within Shopify and Klaviyo. One of the reasons that we've chosen to partner with Klaviyo almost exclusively is it really is the industry leader in e-commerce email marketing. They have a ton of powerful automation, segmentation, and other tools that are really designed specifically for e-commerce and helps brands to really unlock their customer potential. And so in today's webinar, really our focus is going to be how do you enhance your sales using Klaviyo? We're going to share some practical strategies for getting you to the next level. And ultimately, hopefully your takeaway is that you understand Klaviyo's potential in driving sales and that you specifically learn how to implement high converting email flows into your Klaviyo platform. Right. Before we get started, though, I just want to do a quick poll. I think that'll help me kind of understand where everyone's at when it comes to using flows within your business. So real quick, I just want to get a feel of the audience. Do you feel that you are using Klaviyo's email flows to their maximum potential? I'm going to pause here for maybe just 10 seconds while everyone completes the poll, but I have a suspicion that if you're on this webinar, you're interested in taking Klaviyo to the next level. Maybe you recognize that there is some potential. And all right, looks like we have about most of the results in, so I'll just publish this poll. Yeah, like I expected, a little over half really need guidance on better utilization. But for those of you that are feeling like you're using it to its full potential, stay with me. Hopefully there's some really insightful, quick tips that you'll be able to implement into your platform right away. So with that, let's start to talk about flows a little bit. Before we jump into the details, I kind of wanted to start with the basics, Klaviyo Flows 101, if you will. And I really wanted to start off by using a definition of what a flow is in the first place. So a flow is a sequence of actions, which can include email and SMS messages that is triggered when a person performs a specific action within your tech stack. So whether that's placing an order in Shopify or even leaving a review in maybe your review platform, Loyalty Lion, something like that, flows are a way that you can trigger automated marketing activities based on those specific actions. And it really helps to set your marketing on autopilot. And so some of the specific terms that you will encounter as you're setting up your flows include the trigger, which is the starting point for the flow. It includes your action, which is what is the specific task that you want to do, such as send out a message. There's timing. So you can add a time delay in between actions, and that's going to be very important. And then there's logic or conditional splits. And what this allows you to do is branch your flow into multiple paths based on specific criteria. And that's really, whenever we start talking about some advanced flows, that's really where the magic can happen, because what you can do is really factor in maybe different milestones in your customer journey or other pieces of criteria where you can personalize your messaging even further based on the activity of your customers. So I really wanted to make sure that we understood some of these foundational terms because we're going to be using them a lot, especially once we jump into Klaviyo and start looking at some of the things that we can do there. Before we do that, though, I wanted to highlight timing. Again, timing is key whenever it comes to all of this. Ensuring that you get your message, the right message at the right time is really what's going to maximize the impact of all of this work. So, really before you even get started, you should probably spend a little bit of time understanding your customer behavior, kind of looking at analytics to see when are they most likely to engage. If you've been running flows already, you can assess the previous performance of those to see if anything needs to be optimized, because then you can adjust your email timing accordingly based on the customer behavior. And like I mentioned, Klaviyo has a few tools to really help out with this. One of them is the smart sending feature, which will try to use AI to send these emails at the optimal time. But with everything, testing and refining for the best results is certainly going to be recommended. All right, but let's get into the meat of what I'm sure everyone joined us to learn about, which is automated flows. And in my personal opinion, I believe that flows really are the foundation of email marketing. It's the key to consistent engagement. And if done well, you should really strive for a 50-50 split between your flows and your campaigns that you're sending on a regular basis. So that'll be one thing to kind of keep an eye on as you get started with using flows or as you move further in your journey. If you have a really high order rate on your campaigns, like maybe 70% of your orders come from campaigns, well, maybe that highlights that there's opportunity to increase your flow performance to kind of make up some of that room. And then on the flip side, if your flow, if 70% of your orders are coming from flows, well, maybe that highlights the fact that you have an opportunity to send even more campaigns to try to even that out. That way you're not as dependent on one feature or another. But with that, what are some of the must-have flows that everyone should have accounted for? If you had a chance to review our last webinar, we touched on these briefly, but what I'll do now is kind of go into a little bit more detail on some of the must-have flows that should be set up for every account. So the first one is the welcome series, and I'm sure we're all familiar with that one. That's really the highest performing flow that you could possibly have is the welcome series. That's where you get to greet new subscribers, you introduce your brand, and that's really when someone signs up for your newsletter or they sign up for your content for the first time, you know that they have an interest in what it is that you're providing. And so being able to communicate with them right from the start is going to be a very, very powerful tool for you. And then as they start interacting with your site, there are abandonment flows that everyone should have set up, including browse abandonment, which means someone's looked at your site, but they didn't really add anything to the cart or start the checkout process. And then you could take it a step further and have cart abandonment, which means that someone did put something in the cart, but they didn't complete the purchase. So in that case, you would really want to engage with them with an automated abandoned cart flow. Then the moment that we've all been waiting for is whenever they make the purchase. That is probably the second highest opportunity to engage with your customers because they just purchased from you. That means their buying intent is high at that moment. And a lot of us would have the tendency to think that they just purchased, so that maybe they don't want to purchase again, but that's actually the opposite. They just purchased, they're excited about their purchase. This is actually a great opportunity to boost your brand or continue to educate your customers or even try to cross-sell them on other opportunities because you know that they're already primed to make a purchase. And so using this is a really great way to tap into that intent. But as it happens with everyone, customers make a purchase, then they don't purchase for a while. Making sure that you have a win-back flow in place will really help you to re-engage customers that haven't made a purchase in a while. And then there's just some additional flows that I think are really best practice. If you have access to any special data like a birthday flows perform really well because people feel special, they feel heard, they feel taken care of by the brand that they support. So definitely highly recommend using a birthday flow. As well as on the flip side is, you have some customers that purchase and then never come back. You have some customers that are truly your VIPs. These are the ones that are loyal to you. They're spending more than the average customer. And so whenever you identify your customers that fall into this VIP category, you should have a flow set up that really makes them feel special and takes that connection to the next level. So perhaps you can offer them some exclusive offers or early access to your next product or just something to make them feel special. And what that will do is encourage your most valuable customers to become even more valuable and increase their lifetime value even more. And then if you're in the consumable space, if you have something that expires or people need to repurchase, having a replenishment reminder in place is very important. And then we're crossing the line into advanced, but we'll talk about this a little bit more, is just how do you continue to increase your customer loyalty throughout their journey? One of the ways that you can do that is by setting up an order milestone flow. So at different milestones within their journey, maybe it's on the first order, the fifth order, and the 10th order, you can send them a special message or maybe a special reward. We'll take a look at what one of the clients we've worked with, we'll take a look at how they do that, and they send free products whenever their customers reach certain milestones. But this can be really effective to increase engagement. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pause here. We just looked at a lot of must-have flows, and luckily Klaviyo makes it really easy to get started and have a solid foundation set up. pretty quickly. So we're going to take a minute to look around in Klaviyo, set up a couple of these must-have flows, and then from there, we'll kind of move on to some of the more advanced use cases that we have. Before we do that though, one thing I forgot to mention, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to use that Q&A feature in the chat. We have a couple of moderators here that are monitoring those, and I'll make sure to pause and address any questions that anyone has along the way. All right. So we now switched over to Klaviyo, and we're in a demo account because I really kind of wanted to start fresh and kind of give you an idea is if you haven't really gotten started with setting up your flows, I wanted to look at, like I mentioned, some of the pre-built templates that Klaviyo already provides. There's a lot of them that are available for some of those must-have flows that I just mentioned. So let's pop this open and take a look. So in Klaviyo, under flows is where you're going to find the setup for flows, obviously. One of the things I like to do is go to view all ideas, and this is going to pull up, like I mentioned, it's going to pull up these pre-built templates for a lot of these common scenarios. So I would probably recommend starting with the essentials. Like we just mentioned, there's a browse abandonment, a welcome series, a post-purchase follow-up, as well as, the customer win back. And then once you have the essentials set up, then you can start to expand and look at other types of goals that you may have and how can these flows help you to achieve those goals. But let's start with the basics, because I think what happens sometimes is we can feel overwhelmed by all of the options available to us within Klaviyo. It's one of the reasons that we exist as a company is to help support and clear those obstacles for our clients. So one of the things I really recommend is just take it one step at a time. Sure, you need to have your full strategy and plan built out, but in order to make it just a little bit easier to make some momentum, I would say let's just start one thing at a time. And let's start that with the welcome series, which is really the most important and should be set up for every single business, no question. So we'll go ahead and start there with the welcome series. All right, so whenever you go to set this up for the first time, it's going to give you a short description. You can rename it. And then you can also choose which trigger this should use. So like I mentioned earlier, the trigger is really what's going to start this flow off in the first place. For a welcome series, typically that's whenever they join your email list. In this case, it's named newsletter. So whenever someone subscribes to the newsletter, that will trigger this flow for the welcome series. So I'm going to go ahead and click create flow. Great. You can see that we already have a foundational flow here. The trigger is when someone is added to a newsletter, it will then split. And if they've placed an order at least once overall time, they'll get a thank you. But if they've never made a purchase in this flow, it's a great opportunity to incentivize them and maybe offer them a discount. So if they have not placed an order, you can offer them a discount. And then both of those kind of come back and they wait 3 days and they send a final email to all of to everyone that signs up, encouraging them to follow your social media. So I think it's a really great starting point. I think I would certainly recommend adding on to it. I typically recommend maybe 3 to 5 emails in a welcome series, but I've seen some welcome series go to 30 emails. If you feel like you have something really, strong if you feel like you have something strong to communicate, you could really build on this and make it pretty robust. But I would say 3 to 5 is a really strong starting point. And now, before we take a look at some of these specific things, I just wanted to highlight a couple of features here and what you could do. So I mentioned there's a trigger. That's what starts the flow. And then from there, typically what you're working with are actions. So across the left here, you can see the different actions. We can send an email. We can send a text message. We can update a property on their profile. We could do an internal alert to a team. And when we talk about the advanced flows in a second, I'll talk about a couple of these other options. But one really powerful feature is webhooks. And it may be a little bit too technical for the scope of this webinar, but I'm going to touch on it briefly because there's some really cool cross-channel integrations that you can utilize by using webhooks. And what's also cool is that if you've integrated with any other app, there oftentimes are additional actions that will show up here based on the integrations that you have set up within your account. So those are actions. You could set a time delay, and then there's logic. So these were the key terms that I mentioned earlier. Hopefully those make sense. If you have any specific questions of those, put those in the Q&A. But let's just build on this just a little bit. So triggered whenever they sign up for our newsletter. If they have become a customer, or if they're already a customer, they would go down this branch for yes. And if you clicked on this action, it's going to give you some additional options here that you can do. So you can rename it, but really what's most important here is making sure that your subject line, your preview text, and your sender information is updated and accurate. And then you could work on updating your template for this email to make it look really professional and engaging. For this webinar, we're not going to talk about template design really at all. There are plenty of other webinars, especially from Klaviyo, on how to do template design. But one thing I kind of want to mention is I noticed that this is an area that oftentimes stops people from setting up flows. They go in to set up their flow, they get to the first action, which is an email, and then they get overwhelmed with having to create an email template. I would recommend not worrying about your email templates just yet, but get the framework of your flow set up fully based on how you think it would work best. You know, what are the actions and the conditions that need to be accounted for? Get all of that set up as much as possible first. And then what that'll allow you to do is then take it one at a time. And so it's not as overwhelming. I could go in here and I could update. It's going to focus on this first email. Let me update the template. And there's a lot of templates that Klaviyo provides. So, you know, it doesn't have to be overwhelming, but just wanted to kind of relate that's definitely something I've seen and witnessed. And so breaking it into smaller actions that you can take and then taking them one at a time will really help you make progress and momentum as you get everything set up. All right, so we could customize these. We wait 3 days, send the second email. But like I said, I want to extend this a little bit. So we're just going to do a couple of things. We are going to add a time delay after this second email, and we're going to wait 5 days, save that. And then we're going to send one last email. So all we have to do is drag email over here, and then we're free to update the information as we see fit. So all right. Once again, kind of ignoring template. Templates are very important. It's something that you're going to want to A/B test. And so I'll just point out the template library here real quickly. If you haven't seen that, there's a lot of templates that allow you to get started pretty quickly. But let me just bounce back over to our flow, finish this up, and then we'll move along. Yep. So we had to wait 5 days. We'll set up the welcome email 3. And then if there was anything else that we wanted to add here, just additional emails, maybe we want to send a text message, it's really as simple as just dragging this action over, making sure it's in the right spot, and then updating the action with any specific information that you may need. So for an SMS, for example, they would want, what is that text message? You would just update that here. Save it. Now you would have an SMS action. I'll check in on the questions here in just a second, but let's look at a few other template ideas. So you saw how simple that was to really set it up, customize it. The last step would be to make it live and make it actually be available for when your customers sign up. I would probably recommend doing some testing before you did that, but let's just take a look at a couple of other examples here. So if I go to view all flows, you're going to notice there's different versions for different things. So we talked about cart abandonment. Here's one already for happy birthday. First purchase anniversary is a really good one to use. Maybe if you've had something that's out of stock and you want to communicate that, hey, it's back in stock, there's a couple of templates here. One is VIP versus non-VIP. Again, maybe let's just take a look at this one as an example. But you know, just spend some time, just review these, maybe make a list. What are 5 flows that I want to set up this week? Let me just start there. Choose 5 that really you think are going to have the highest chance of success. Set those up because you will already be so much further along than a lot of companies that aren't using flows and automations. So, you know, really don't get overwhelmed, even though there is a lot of options. Start small, maybe choose 5, get those set up, and then you can move on to adding more, because really all of this is an ongoing process anyways. But let's take a quick look at the back in stock flow for VIPs versus non-VIPs. All right. So as you can see, it looks very similar. You have the same actions, timing, logic. All of this is going to be the same experience anytime you're setting up a flow. For this one, what it's doing is when a product is back in stock, if they have ordered over 3 times, in this case, they're considering that to be a VIP. So they're notifying them right away. For VIPs, hey, look, we have this back in stock. We promised you that as a VIP, you would get early access. We would get early access to that. And here's proof that they are. They're getting the email right away. But if they haven't ordered 3 times, we're waiting 2 hours. And then you're sending that stock alert, back in stock alert to everybody in your list. And so that's just a great way that you can segment your audience a little bit and send them a little bit more personalized information, which just makes them feel much more connected to your brand and engaged with your company. So with that, I'm going to see if there's any questions that I can take a look at, and then we will jump back over to the presentation. All right, great. So once again, these are some of the must-have flows. If you want access to this, you could just reach out to me. We have tons of resources that we could share to help you get started on the must-have flows. But now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about how do we take this to the next level for our email marketing. And that's where advanced flows come into place. Really, I think once you have the foundation set up, that should really be your starting point. I would start, if you don't have those must-have flows set up, start there, get those set up, get them running, because the faster that you have data, the faster you're going to learn, and the faster that you're going to be able to optimize your strategy based on what your customers are actually doing. But once you have that foundation set up, then it's time to take it to the next level. And really, I think one of the most powerful ways to take it to the next level is by personalizing and being more targeted with your engagement. So some specific examples of how you could be a little bit more targeted is with customer loyalty flows. So we talked about the milestones. You could send them emails at certain milestones that would let them know, hey, TaskOn is paying attention. They see that I've placed 5 orders. That's great. They must care about me, so therefore I will be more loyal to the brand. So we can look at that in a second. Cross-selling and upselling is another way that you could really be targeted. So if you know that someone has bought a product that goes well with another product that you have, you could set up a flow that whenever someone places an order that falls into that category, then send them some emails recommending that other product. Or maybe you're a company that sells maybe you have a subscription plan that customers can sign up to. One great thing you could do is, hey, I've noticed someone has purchased this 2 times in the last 60 days. Maybe they would want to sign up for our subscription plan. So you could have a flow set up that says, all right, if they've purchased 2 times in the last 60 days, then send them these emails in order to encourage them to sign up for our subscription plan. That would be kind of an advanced way of leveraging flows to drive sales. Then you can have certain seasonal campaigns where, perhaps you have certain moments that are important for certain segments of your customers, where you could go ahead and set up flows that trigger on certain dates, like holidays, so that you are really communicating with them at the right time and driving higher sales that way. And then lastly, using predictive triggers. So this is an area that I really think is going to continue to grow this year, especially with the expansion of AI tools and just all of the different platforms that are available. But Klaviyo specifically is releasing predictive triggers. For example, what is their expected date of the next order? So Klaviyo has all of this data. They're starting to now predict when certain things are going to happen. And as this gets more sophisticated, it's really going to feel like we're able to read our customers' minds a little bit. So you want to be careful with it. You don't want to just, hit them with an automated email that's maybe not at the best time based on some of these predictive triggers, but this could be a really powerful way to connect with them at times when they were actually about to take action. So these are some examples. We're going to go in, we're going to set up an advanced flow and kind of use a couple of these examples to highlight what we just talked about. But there's a couple of other topics that you really need to understand in order to take your flows to the next level. And I've already been using the term a little bit. I'm not going to go super deep on customer segmentation because that's actually our next webinar topic. But really, segmentation allows you to tailor your content to specific audience groups, which would increase the relevance of your message and increase engagement. So there's different ways that you can segment. You could do it by their purchasing behavior, or maybe there's certain demographics data that you have access to. But I think one of the starting places is engagement levels. So if you're currently sending your email to your entire list, every single email, maybe your first opportunity is to engage or is to segment them based on their level of engagement with those messages. And you can use Klaviyo's insights or analytics to help you refine those. And once again, AI tools are coming to help. But for now, there are some just kind of key segments that you would want to have accounted for. So I'll quickly go through this, but I mentioned maybe you would have a segment for your new subscribers versus those that are engaged. Maybe you have different flavors of that. Maybe you have a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day engaged, and you test out different performance levels based on those segments. Certainly want to have your VIP segment. Maybe you have at-risk segment, so you could target them to try to re-engage them. Maybe you're doing something specific for your cart abandoners, but then a couple of other really strong pieces of data to use for your segments. One is geographic location. So if you're able to collect that location information from them, there's some cool things that you can do. And then same with product categories. So perhaps you are a pet supply store and you're able to identify those customers that are dog owners versus cat owners versus bird owners. And you could use those segments to then communicate very specific targeted messages just to the dog owners, for example. Or maybe you communicate one message to your dog owners because that's your strongest segment, but then you communicate another message to the rest of the customers. But just by doing something very small like that can actually have a tremendous impact on the performance, because now your bird owners aren't receiving emails about dog products, which maybe they don't have, a connection for or connection with. So segmentation is just a really powerful way to communicate your message to the right people in the right way. You can get carried away with it, and then all of a sudden you're kind of lost in 15 different segments that you're trying to use. So once again, I would maybe start slow, start with 1 or 2 segments, build that out. But once you get to having, 30, 40, 50,000 people in your customer lists, if you're not segmenting, you are missing out on revenue, point blank. So having a good understanding of some of these key segments will really help you out. And then as you become more advanced, which you can learn about in our next webinar, you could try even different and cooler things with those. And for all of this, I just have to touch on A/B testing, because we should just really be always testing the things that we're implementing, working to continuously improve that performance, testing different elements to see what resonates. And so we'll look at that in our example. But some of the things that you can test include subject lines, email content, your call to actions, but really testing your sending times and your frequency, I think, can be helpful as well. And then just analyzing those results. What doesn't get measured doesn't get done is a saying that gets used a lot in business, but it's really true. If you're doing the A/B testing and then not analyzing the results, there's really no point in A/B testing to begin with. So make sure that you're kind of closing the loop and seeing that test all the way through and analyzing the performance is really important, because sometimes we have great ideas, we test it, maybe it didn't perform as well as we thought. That's okay. We'll test something new. And it's a continuous journey of optimizing along the way. Yeah, I mentioned analytics. I'll go through this quickly, but they have data on anything that you want to watch. You really want to watch your open rates, click rates, conversion rates, revenue, unsubscribe rates. Make sure that those are constantly making progress, and then just using that data to inform your strategy and drive your decisions. All right, great. So I'm going to pause here before I jump back into Klaviyo and we work on a more advanced type of flow. We do have a couple of questions here in the chat. So the first one comes from Jessa. Thank you, Jessa. Question is, how can we best utilize Klaviyo's analytics to measure the success of our flows? It's a great question, and I'll show you that whenever I demo it, but directly within the flows themselves, you're going to be able to see analytics. There's going to be a button at the top that allows you to see analytics. And then for every step or every action in your flow, you're going to be able to see what was the open rate, what was the click rate, how many orders were placed, and so on. So that's normally where I recommend starting, is just directly in the flow themselves, so that you can perhaps make some adjustments right there. If you notice something that's out of place, maybe you can go ahead and start to do some A/B testing once you notice that a piece of information. So that's one place that you can do it, but then also utilizing reports or dashboards to help you keep an eye on the important metrics is really helpful. The second question is, for flows and segments, can we create a flow to create a custom segment? And also, what's the difference between segments and a list when we're talking about these? So that's a great question. Maybe at this point, I'll go ahead and shift my screen and we'll go ahead and look at both of these and I'll help clarify just a little bit. All right, so it's a great question, and maybe we should start there just briefly. So within Klaviyo, on the left under audience is where all of your contacts or your customers are going to be stored. Specifically under lists and segments is where you're going to be able to see the different lists and segments, pretty obvious, of the customers. So a list is really the starting point. This is a static list. I'm supposed to use the word in the definition, but it's a static list of your customers. So it doesn't really change. Somebody joins the list, they are static there until a change is made directly to that list. So let's say that I have 1,000 people on my list, those 1,000 will stay. If I want to update the criteria, I would have to go in and update that list. I would have to remove people from the list directly. So it's more of a static way of accessing your customers. And I typically recommend keeping the number of lists small. That way they're manageable. So maybe you have one email list, one SMS list, and then maybe you have a couple of other lists that you use for specific purposes, like if you're running a very specific promotion or something like that. But typically I would try to keep those simple. That way they're easy to maintain. And if you do have to make any updates, everything's in one place list. A segment, however, is dynamic. So a segment will take your list, put some criteria on it, and that will leave you with a more narrow segment. And segments are dynamic. Dynamic meaning they change based on certain criteria. So for example, if I was editing this segment, there's different criteria that I can use. And if someone meets this criteria, they automatically get placed in the segment. And then if they no longer meet the criteria, they get removed from this segment. And all of that happens dynamically. We don't have to actually go in and add people or remove people like we would with a list. Very long answer for a short question. So thank you for your patience on that. But just wanted to make sure that was clear, because you're right. Having these lists and segments set up before your flows actually is going to be kind of important. So taking a look at the segments that you have, getting those set up, then you can go into your flows, and we'll take a look at a couple of advanced examples here. All right, so what I want to do is, for this one, we're going to start fresh, and I think this will help us just kind of clarify a couple of more terms, and then we will kind of work through just a quick flow. I know we don't have too much time left, but so I'll try to be quick. All right, so I'm going to create this one from scratch. This one is going to be, so we have our welcome series, but now let's create a dog owner loyalty flow. All right, when you start creating flows from scratch, you're going to notice that the setup is a little bit different. So previously, the trigger was already chosen for us. In this case, we get to select the trigger. And this is really where it can be pretty powerful. So you could choose different things. Maybe checkout started, maybe someone was added to a list, or maybe in this case, they were added to a segment. So you could always go to all triggers here and kind of look at the different options, but I am going to do added to segment. And which segment will trigger this flow? This is going to be for the dog owners. So when someone is added to the dog owners segment, this will trigger. And there's one additional piece that we didn't mention earlier, which is your trigger filter. So what you can do is you can add additional pieces of criteria here. Perhaps in this case, what I want to do is only include, all right, just a basic example. So maybe I only want to trigger this whenever someone gets added to the dog owner segment and they have placed an order at least once over all time, then I want to trigger this flow. So that's what a flow filter is. It allows you to exclude certain contacts that maybe you don't want this to trigger for. All right, so we have our trigger. We'll go ahead and save that. We'll confirm it. One thing to mention, I just clicked out, but once you create your trigger, you are not able to update it here. Probably pretty important to take note of that. But once you create your trigger, you can't update the trigger type here. What you would have to do is exit out, clone this, and then update the trigger. So that's one little thing that I think can be frustrating at times. So I just wanted to point that out. But in this case, our trigger's good. Someone is added to dog owners. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to test something out. We're going to do a conditional split, and we're going to do a random sample only on 50% of the people. Okay. And maybe one of the things that we want to test with this flow is there an impact on having a time delay versus not having a time delay? So for this one, I'm going to say, let's wait 2 days before we send it. Okay. And then from there, we're going to send some emails. I skip the template for now, but you would just, update your template to select it. All right. So we have our email here. That's the first one. Now, maybe I want to send the same email. So I'm just going to clone this one. And now I have email 2, which I can just drag over here. So it's going to be the same email. The only difference is they're going to get it right away. These people are going to get it 2 days later. So this is one of the ways that we can test different things within our flows. So testing the timing. There's a few other examples I could talk about, but for now, we're going to say that's what we're testing. And then after that, we're going to rejoin it. I did the test, but now everybody is going to get a text message. And after that, wait 1 more day. Great. All right. And then you could take this on even further. So I'm gonna switch over and show a different account. I just kind of wanted to show how you set some of these up, but let me show you an actual example of how a loyalty program could be set up. So in this case, the trigger is when someone placed an order, and there's no flows. It's just every time someone places an order, this gets triggered. They then wait an hour and a half. And if they've placed an order 5 times, they get this special email here, which says, thank you. Hey, we just noticed this is your 5th order of all time. You get a free shaker bottle on your next order. Great. As a customer, I'm happy about that. But let's say it was not equals 5. So then it would go no. And have they placed it 11 times? If so, they get another one. If they placed it 19 times, they get another one. 29 times, they get another one. So you can see how this could really work well to engage your customers, to encourage them to become long-term customers of your business, continuing to place orders. And there's really no limit to where you can take these conditions. So one of the things I recommend is you start with the basics, set up all of your must-have flows. Then take it a step further, set up some advanced flows with some segments. Once you feel like those are now rolling, then it's time to take it one step further and really start to break down some of your flows into different branches depending on your customer data. So in this flow, for example, could have taken it a step further and said, actually, have they placed an order 5 times, and not only was it 5 times, but where the collection, was dog products, for example. In this case, I'll just choose one of these. So I could say, hey, if they've placed an order in this collection, do this. But if they placed an order in our cat collection, do this. If they purchase something in our bird collection, do that. Then you would have 3 branches coming off of this first one. But then, all right, no, it's not equal to 5 times. You do the same thing over here. Have they placed the order 11 times? 1 in dog, 1 in cat, 1 in bird. And then you could just continue to expand. And again, this works a little bit better if your email list is larger and you have the data to segment and to target. But hopefully this gives you just a little idea of how you can really make these very robust and continue to add in additional circumstances and situations as you grow your flows within Klaviyo. All right, so once you have played around, you have your foundational flows set up, you have some advanced flows set up, everything is working pretty well. One of the things that you probably want to explore is other integrations with other tools. This is another topic we'll be hosting a webinar on in 2 months. But again, one of the reasons that Klaviyo is the most powerful tool for e-commerce companies is partly because of their integrations. So you can connect with your existing e-commerce platforms like Shopify or WooCommerce, Magento, some of the other ones. But you could also sync with a lot of other platforms. You could sync with Google Ads, for example. And as you start to build out your segments, you can have that automatically create custom audiences within Google. Or you could do the same thing with Facebook. Or perhaps you have a quiz on your website that you're using to collect additional data, like Octane AI or something like that, Digio. Then you could have the results of those surveys integrate in, and then you could have a trigger based on that. Like when someone submits a quiz, then do this. So there's really a lot of potential with integrations. A lot of the platforms are already almost set up and ready for you to utilize. It's just a matter of you finding out who they are and connecting them and optimizing that way. So integrations, I believe, are essential if you really want to be advanced with your flows, because there are just certain triggers that are going to be available only in those other platforms. And so you could bring that all into one place, which is Klaviyo, and truly automate your marketing lifecycle. And so just to bring it back and kind of close us out, I really just wanted to remind us on the goal of this, which was to boost your conversion rates. Really, as you get set up and you're using flows and campaigns, try to balance it if possible. Mixing your flows with your campaigns to make sure that you're not being intrusive, but you are communicating consistently with your customers, and just always measure your success. So as you get started, set some specific goals. Maybe it's, I want to set up 5 flows by Friday. Okay, that's a specific goal. We'll get it done. And just do that every week. You'll be amazed by how much progress you can make in a very short amount of time, and just continuously refine those strategies. So really with that, I hope you're ready to maximize. Check out some of our future webinars on our website. If you want help with any of this, setting it up, or if you just really want to talk through strategy, you can contact us. We can call us, check out our website, follow us on social media. But with that, I really just wanted to make sure to give one last opportunity. If there were any questions that I could answer, I will be hosting some upcoming webinars. So in February, we will host one on customer segmentation. In March, we'll host one on integrations and how we can boost sales with those. And then on the 3rd, we'll do one on Shopify plugins as well, because those just really have a good opportunity to grow sales. So with that, I'll check one last time for any questions, and just really thank you for your attendance today. And hopefully you learned something new and valuable that you can take home to increase your sales with Klaviyo. All right. Well, there were no questions. Thank you once again, everyone. Again, my name was Nick Lutrick with Task On E-commerce. Really a pleasure to be able to share this information with you today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Take care.